how can they harness themselves to fully step into all the goals they want to achieve, even if it's not present in their astrology chart?
It's never really about your gifts. A lot of times people will squander their gifts. They don't realize they have a gift in like public speaking or a gift in art. At the end of the day, it comes down to hard work. Like, how willing are you able to dedicate yourself to the task at hand, to the goal that you have? And it all really just starts with mindset.
Welcome to the GRACED podcast, a space for everyday magic for your everyday life. We do this through rituals, aligning yourself to your soul's purpose, and creating alchemy to heal our mind, body, and spirits so that you can bring in more love and joy, manifest your desires, and believe in your dreams. Listen and watch over at graceduong.com/podcast and on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, and all the places you can find me on social media. Now let's dive in to today's episode.
Welcome to the GRACED podcast, a space where we talk about everyday magic for your everyday life. Today's guest is Alice Hu, a career astrologer and founder of the Woo Woo Company. We talk about how to use astrology as a means to navigate your career, the power of Saturn through the houses, and also tying in your other astrology placements like your South Node, North Node, and what are the best placements for utilizing social media. Before we get started, I do want to talk about the Mystic Mondays app. Have you downloaded it yet? We do have some new updates rolling out, so make sure to download the Mystic Mondays app to draw your tarot and oracle cards of the day. It's free to download on the Apple Store and Google Play Store. And we're also doing a giveaway of Alex's expanded career report, which is usually a paid report. Over 15 pages about your gifts, talents, North Node, South Node, and other key placements in your career astrology chart. Make sure to enter that giveaway on social media. Check out YouTube and Instagram for the giveaway details. Now let's dive into this episode. Hi, Alice. Welcome to the GRACED podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, likewise. So much of your work revolves around Saturn and the Saturn return. For anyone that doesn't know, what is the Saturn return and how did yours impact you?
So Saturn return actually happens 3 times in your life. So your late 20s, your mid to late 50s, and mid to late 80s. And the first one always hits the hardest. And it's a time of existential crisis. It lasts for about 3 years or so. And it's really a time for you to mature. Saturn is the planet of maturity. It is one that's almost like a father figure as well. And it makes sure that you are making good on the promises that you've made to yourself. Kind of like, are you following your soul's contract? So during this time, it is very normal for people to quit their jobs, to move, to get married. It's like really big life changes that ultimately affect career. Because it's about you. It's not about your relationship with others. It's like, okay, where do you find purpose in your life and how does that pertain to your career? So existential crisis, really, really normal. People become entrepreneurs during this time. For me, I became a full-time entrepreneur. I moved back to the United States from Shanghai. I spent most of my 20s in Shanghai, and it was a very sobering time of me figuring out my belief systems, what was really important, exploring a big theme around freedom. And I felt like mine was a very long time. I had a lot of like resisting. There's always like a pre-period, a post-period, a shadow period. And so from my Saturn return, I created Woo Woo Company. And Woo Woo Company led to Saturn. And I remember yoga, spirituality, meditation, and mindfulness being such powerful tools for myself. And I was like, I have to share this with other people. I think it's kind of weird. I hope people will receive it because back then I was based in Washington, D.C. and it was 2018, 2019. I'm like, not sure. I feel really called to this, but I feel very vulnerable in sharing this idea and also executing on this idea and here we are, 5.5, almost 6 years later.
So during this Saturn return period, what were some signs for you where you're like drawn to create Woo Woo Company and why the name Woo Woo Company?
Yes. So each Saturn return for someone is going to be a little bit different. The major overarching theme of kind of having an existential crisis, figuring out what's the most aligned career path for you will still exist. But based on what sign Saturn is in, that flavor will change. For me, my Saturn is in Sagittarius. So freedom is a really, really big theme. Currently, Saturn is in Pisces. We're entering the second year of Saturn being in Pisces. So, anyone who is in their late 20s, early 30s, they are experiencing like a spiritual awakening, a deeper connection to intuition, psychic ability, and music, and realizing how they've been delusional in their lives. Pisces is a very dreamy, imaginative sign, the most artistic, the most psychic of all the signs as well. And so that's a bit of like the theme of what people are exploring right now for their Saturn returns. And going back to my theme of Saturn being in Sagittarius, it's a lot about belief systems, freedom, philosophy. This is a lot of what a Sagittarius is about. And also, I feel like it's a very much so a sign of duality, not just Gemini, but also Sagittarius. And it's kind of like being serious, but being like comedic and playful. And for me, I was just trying to figure out like, what do I believe in? What are my values? At that point, I was looking for jobs. I was like, I could do anything. And, when you think that, that means you can do nothing. You don't have enough clarity. And like, I had an upgrade in belief systems, and I don't remember how the name came to me, but it's very much so tongue in cheek. At that time, when I started the business, it was purely events based. I had around 6 to 8 events a month once it really got going. And I wanted people to know, like, oh, yeah, this is what you're getting. Like, there wasn't any confusion of it being spiritual, it being more out there than other things. But also, when you read the event description, when you attended the event, it was actually a lot of practical insights. And that's a lot of the Capricorn in my chart, as well as my South Node in Virgo, these earth signs add that element of groundedness to the work that I do. So it's a bit tongue in cheek. You're like, oh, you think it's out there, it's not for you. But actually, you'd be surprised how much it opens up for you. Any of these modalities that I was sharing at the time.
Absolutely. And as someone who has a Capricorn stellium, actually my Saturn is in Capricorn. So when I look back on my Saturn return, I started Mystic Mondays at 27, and then I ended up moving back to where I'm from in Philadelphia. So in some ways it was like a return to home. But I do feel like the sign Capricorn is like an extended Saturn return.
Yes. Well, I always say that for my clients who have Saturn in Capricorn, they received a lot of career success during their Saturn return. They like worked extra hard in all the things that they did. But once like their Saturn return kind of ended, like let's say that last year, and they came out of it the 6 months after and the 12 months after, they're like, wait, I actually don't want any of these things. Like, I'm being recognized for X, Y, and Z, or I've made a lot of progress, or I achieved the goals that I wanted to achieve, but none of it feels quite right. It's almost like a delayed Saturn return. Did you feel that way, Grace?
I'm thinking back and I feel like when Saturn returned in my chart, it felt like I was growing up in terms of like having really going forward in my business and learning what it means to be a business person, hiring people, having people go, the twists and turns of being a business owner. And I think I learned a lot about myself. At the same time, I also pursued a lot of spiritual type of certifications like Reiki, studying to Reiki master, getting my sound healing certification, past life regression training, breathwork training to level 3, like you name it. I feel like I've done all of it. Yoga training, yin yoga training, hot yoga teacher training, So I was into all of that, but I felt like all of that taught me and harnessed this more spiritual side of me, which I probably felt a bit inexperienced in because when I started Mystic Mondays, I essentially wanted to learn the tarot cards myself. And my background is in graphic design, so I feel very comfortable in that area. But I like to say everything that I do is in constant pursuit of my identity, which is probably, some other aspects of my chart. But for example, like I never considered myself to be a writer until I got published. And now I'm a podcast host. but I only have the identity of a podcast host because I made a podcast. So some of these things you kind of have to give yourself these opportunities to then pursue, I suppose. And I think part of that is believing in myself, even if you're not fully confident in doing it, and just going after it anyway. I think Saturn as well has a lot to do with time and my relationship to time, because I feel like now I'm a bit more of like, yeah, sometimes it does take years to actually create something. Like a deck for me could take like a full year just to make, right? And I've made 5 now. And, some people, it takes them multiple years. I have somebody inside the Create Your Deck Club, which is a membership where I teach people how to make their own decks. He's been making his own deck for like 10 plus years. And then he joined the club and, he's been making great progress with us. But some people get stuck in that like perfectionism as well. But I would love to hear more about Saturn and how that impacts your career through the houses and through the signs, if you don't mind telling us more about that.
Oh, yeah, of course. And I just wanted to circle back. It sounded like during your Saturn return, because you already had like your business, you were exploring like all the different avenues of spirituality and learning all these things. You're like, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. But towards the end of it, it was like, it was for me to understand myself better, not for me to become, let's say, a sound bath facilitator or like a yoga teacher. It was probably during that time you may have thought like, oh yeah, maybe it'll be this, maybe that. Let me just do all of it and kind of see where I land.
That's very accurate. I feel like I don't necessarily go to any of these trainings like thinking I'll come out of it like I'm just going to do past life regression from now on. It's really for me to understand myself better, but to also have the tools to use for myself and also friends, or family, or, however it occurs and happens. So for example, when my grandfather was passing away and, he was very old at the time, so it was expected, I did have the opportunity to be able to give him or facilitate some Reiki. So that was a really beautiful experience to be able to share that with him. And also I felt the presence of ancestors in the room while I was, giving him Reiki to help give him some energy as he was on his last legs. So, I feel like things like that help you in any life situation. If I'm going to continue with the Reiki example, like I like to give myself Reiki when I'm traveling sometimes, like if I'm on a plane, because you can really do Reiki anywhere. Or if you want to do some breath work on your own, you can always do that. You don't necessarily need to do all the training to do all of this stuff. But for me, I also just like to learn, and I like to understand why we do these things in a certain way and how that influences you. And then I feel like, honestly, all of it does impact Mystic Mondays in some way, because if I'm creating the content and the decks and how I'm experiencing myself, I think it does influence whatever you're creating as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so back to your other question about Saturn. Yeah, so when we look at Saturn, Saturn is the planet of maturity and responsibility. It is very much so like a coming of age of where you need some more discipline in your life. So as we move through the houses, it has like a different flavor. So right now, as an example, Saturn is in Pisces. So you can view it as Saturn is taking on the energy of Pisces, which is very imaginative, very spiritual, as well as very creative as well. It's one of the most intuitive signs of the zodiac. So there's that one element. So that's one area of focus. And then when we move through the houses, it has kind of like, where is it happening in your life? So if you're curious about how it affects your houses, you want to see, at least right now, where Pisces is present in your chart to see where that area is being activated in terms of, let's say, if we go through each of the houses, the first house is about identity. The second house is about self-worth and money. The third house is about communication, your relationship with your siblings. The fourth house is around home, nostalgia, around family. The fifth house is around creativity, inner child healing, as well as dating. The sixth house is about wellness, like your daily routine and kind of work schedule. The seventh house is based on relationships. The eighth house is around like transformation, around finance and resources. And then the ninth house is around philosophy, belief systems, like higher thinking and connection. The 10th house is around career, and the 11th house around community and humanitarian efforts. And then the 12th house is around spirituality and intuition and arts and entertainment. So those are all the different houses. And, if you have Saturn present, let's say in your first house, that means that you have a lot of lessons related to identity. And then again, through the example of Saturn in Pisces, you want to see where Pisces shows up in your chart, which house it's in. And that adds an extra element of, I need to be more disciplined and mature in that area of my life. So there's a couple different ways to interpret it.
Yeah. Can you define career astrology for us?
Yeah, so when I was starting off with astrology, I really wanted to focus on career. And I think that it's really a personal interpretation of what career astrology means to that specific astrologer. For me, I like to use astrology as a way to help you understand yourself so that you understand the best jobs that are going to be in alignment to your values, your desires, and that could also mean a creation of a business as well. So that is how I defined career astrology.
You mentioned the South Node, which brings a groundedness to your practice. You said your South Node is in Virgo. And I feel like when approaching career astrology or wanting to understand your soul mission or soul purpose, the North Node is brought up a lot. Whereas, I feel like the South Node is our comfort zone where we feel safe, but we also have our gifts there, our natural talents there. But moving into the North Node, where we have to perhaps get out of our comfort zone and put ourselves out there, learn our karmic purpose or whatever it is, how would you describe the relationship from navigating your North Node, but also honing in on the talents and what you need to let go of when it pertains to the South Node?
Yes. So when it comes to career astrology, there's a couple different components that you can focus on. I really like to share about the North Node because I call it the purpose placement. And as of now, I'm based in the United States. I have a lot of Western and American values, and we spend most of our time working, like Monday through Friday, honestly, like 7 days a week if you're an entrepreneur. And there's just such a focus on work. And I think sometimes people are like, well, like your purpose isn't in your work. But I believe that as long as we're spending more time working rather than kind of pursuing our hobbies or anything creative or something personal, then most of our life lessons are going to be learned through work. And that is the North Node. The North Node is about purpose, life lessons, your destiny, really the types of jobs and businesses that you can start, that you can pursue, that will feel very expansive. They'll feel really stretchy, but at the same time, it is going to be something that once you kind of get the ball rolling and start to explore, you're like, wow, kind of feels like home. And what you're saying about the South Node is, yes, it's all about karma. It's about a different set of gifts that you're much more comfortable with. It's your comfort zone, it's past lives. And I find that when people are confused or stuck in their career, that means that they're stuck in their South Node in terms of pursuing jobs, businesses that center around those characteristics. So let's say, do you want to share your South Node and I can give an example?
Sure, South Node in Leo, North Node in Aquarius.
So with the South Node in Leo, it's like you're very comfortable being in the spotlight, very comfortable being artistic, performing. And it makes sense now because I know that what you were doing before was graphic design. It's very, very creative and it's like art. Right. And so it's not about you leaving those skills behind. It's about using those things for the collective, which is the North Node in Aquarius placement. And to figure out what are my artistic abilities, my leadership qualities that allow myself to really put my resources and time into a specific cause that I care about, a group of people or an organization. That is a lot of those Aquarian characteristics to make life a better place.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't necessarily agree that I was always comfortable being in the spotlight. I actually wasn't. And I feel like I had to grow into it. which maybe has other things to do in my chart. Or maybe that's harnessing South Node talents that you already had, but perhaps didn't fully cultivate yet. Is that a part of also stepping into career astrology as well, or stepping into your full purpose?
When clients will say like, oh, like that I don't like relate to like being in the spotlight for like the South Node in like Leo example, that means that there must be something else like in your chart that you don't resonate as much with. It could also be maybe where your South Node is in your chart as well. Might be one that isn't as performative. It might not be like a fire element house. I have to think about that one. Usually, South Node characteristics and gifts, it's not always going to be all of them. Some of them are going to be kind of like more spotlighted, more highlighted than others. And so I'd be curious to know, like, have you always maybe felt comfortable, or maybe other people will come to you for coaching or to feel empowered?
I think that comes naturally. Yeah. Strangers love to tell me things.
Yes, I feel like you must have some other like water elements in your chart as well, which every time someone has a lot of like water elements in their chart, that means like people love to tell you their stories, they love to ask like your opinions of things. But yeah, long story short, it depends on a couple other placements as well in terms of like, oh, not feeling comfortable being in like the spotlight.
Yeah. So, for anyone who is struggling with finding their purpose, what can they cultivate more of? Because you mentioned the elements and having double Capricorn, Capricorn rising and Capricorn moon. So, you're cultivating those energies and having that activated in your business. I also feel like in the ways that I move about in my business, like my zodiac signs are very important for me. And so, what are some signs for people to look for, like their strengths and possible weaknesses in their natal chart?
I would say that when you're looking at strengths and weaknesses, let's say like the sun sign is like how you thrive. And so when you're choosing a job or choosing a business, your sun sign really needs to feel nourished. Let's say like your sun is in Gemini, you probably want to be doing something that interacts with a lot of people using social media, like speaking, communication, like writing. That's something that's going to be a big component of the work that you do. That's just something that allows you to really like be lit up. Your South Node is one of those things where it's like the gifts that'll help you kind of achieve those steps forward in exploring your North Node. The North Node can be challenging for some people to accept and to understand because it is the opposite of the South Node placement. And with that, it just really depends because some people feel very aligned with their North Node because they have, let's say, if their North Node is in Virgo, they might be like a Virgo sun. And then that dissonance really isn't strong because they already have that sign present in another quote unquote planet. Other areas I would say when you're looking at figuring out next steps in your career are the traditional career houses. So the second house, the sixth house, and the 10th house. The second house is like how you make money, also your money mindset. The sixth house is like how you work, your routines, the best ways to kind of engage with collaborators, like coworkers. And then the 10th house is really how you find success. Another thing that I feel like people don't always talk about when it comes to career is like your Venus placement. So Venus is very much so this planet of like love, of values, of desire, but really it's more than that. It's how you activate your magnetism. It's what people come to you for. And so that also can give you an idea of products and services to start or roles that you can take to be really like magnetic. Like let's say your Venus is in Sagittarius, you're probably a very good researcher.
Hey, have you downloaded the Mystic Mondays app yet? Well, if you haven't, what are you waiting for? If you want to take the Mystic Mondays tarot and oracle cards with you wherever you go for your daily rituals, this is the app for you. Whether you're on the go, happen to be traveling, and don't have a physical deck with you, no worries because we've got you covered with the Mystic Mondays app. Check it out! It's available to download on iOS and Android devices inside the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. Now, back to the episode.
how do you see that playing out in your chart? Like your second house placement, sixth house, 10th house, and how has that evolved? Because you mentioned Woo Woo Company has gone through several iterations. So what has that process been like for you? Like it started off as just events, and now what does it look like?
So when I'm looking at my second house, it has Aquarius and Pisces because I use the Placidus way of interpreting charts. So when you use Placidus, you could have one house with more than one sign, which is different from equal and whole sign. And with the second house, I have always found that I've made my money, like the best money when it comes to technology. When I started my career off in like social media and e-commerce, it was like really, really new. And so I was able to negotiate a much more favorable salary than like, let's say my friends working in traditional industries of like journalism or media. Like I remember that very, very clearly when I started my career off in Shanghai. And like since then, as I've like really grown the business, I particularly have been looking at the second house these last few years because Aquarius is that sign of technology, very innovative, forward thinking. And then Pisces is very spiritual. It's talking about like healing and creativity. And that's why it made sense after I was kind of like, I don't know if I should start this new website. And then I like looked at my chart for guidance. I'm like, oh, like this is it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, astrology is really a form of reading energy. And I already felt it in my body. My intuition was already like, you should really create Saturn. You really should. And I was like, I'm not ready. I don't want to do that. But then some time went by and I was like, okay, let me just kind of revisit this idea. Let me look at my chart. And it just made so much sense to me. And then I believe like my sixth house is, yes, it's Gemini. And so my Venus is also in Gemini as well. And writing is a really wonderful way for me to connect with people. And it's kind of grown and changed. I've always had like workbooks sold on my website. People really enjoyed them, but it just never really took off. And I also felt like I never really was fully invested in those things. And I think that once I started this website, Saturn, it all kind of came together because it's a report.
Yeah. So social media is such a huge part of one's career nowadays. And I think a lot of content creators can even think of themselves as their own media houses. What are some signs within the astrology chart for one's strengths and weaknesses within social media and how they can best present themselves?
I think that if you have Gemini in your sun, your moon, your rising, or north or south node, that social media, whether you want it to be or not, is going to be something that you are good at or being pulled to. Also, if you have, let's say, your Mars or your Venus, so Mars is like how you take action, how you work, like leadership, working style. Venus is like that magnetism, that attraction. And based on all the other things happening in your chart, it might have like a different weight. Traditionally speaking, and what I really believe is like if Gemini or Sagittarius is your sun, your moon, your rising, your north or your south node, you just have a high propensity of wanting to communicate more with others. I also see that if you have planets like in the third house, three or more planets, that also gives that vibe of like really utilizing social media. But I think one of the more interesting things is that social media really is a very important way to operate business. And even if, let's say, you don't enjoy doing it, if you have a consumer facing business, you will need to hire someone to do that for you, right? And then another sign that I see like really enjoying social media is Leo, kind of like being in the spotlight, being on camera. But the only caveat I would say is if you have like your north node in Leo, I've found that those people with placement have a difficult time like really allowing themselves to be center stage because that's that growth element, that's that growth placement.
Yeah. And so, what are some ways for people if they feel like, they don't have a certain something, placement, whatever it is, and they might feel like they're in a quote unquote weak position? How can they harness themselves to fully step into all the goals they want to achieve, even if it's not present in their astrology chart?
I would like to say that astrology really isn't about predicting the future, although there are predictive astrologers. There is like, I've always just viewed astrology as a beautiful tool for introspection. And I think that when we use astrology or any modality too much and be like, oh, well, it says like I'm not good at it, it's really just giving you a general understanding of your strengths and your weaknesses. But it's really up to you how you want to invest your time and your resources, because maybe that's just something that you really desire to have a stronger voice activation. Then I would really say listen to your intuition and keep on pursuing, keep on trying, because ultimately it's never really about your gifts. A lot of times people will squander their gifts. They don't realize they have a gift in like public speaking or a gift in art. At the end of the day, it comes down to hard work. Like, how willing are you able to dedicate yourself to the task at hand, to the goal that you have? And it all really just starts with mindset. And that's why I really enjoy astrology, because it provides an easier way to do the introspective work, the therapy work, that allows you to really embrace yourself for like who you are, like weaknesses, gifts, and all that's in between.
Yeah. So what happens if, someone doesn't reach their north node or doesn't cultivate aspects of it? Does it hit them again within their next Saturn return, or does it follow them into the next lifetime? How does that work?
So, some people don't relate to their north nodes, because I feel like when I'm explaining certain placements, it's really hard to bring in everything. Even if it's like someone's chart, it's like there's so much going on. But the way to make astrology more digestible is to focus on Saturn, the planet, is to focus on north node, that point. And I would like to say for people to not get discouraged, because there's a lot of other things happening in your birth chart, but also your solar return chart. What's happening to you specifically in this year? That's also an added element. And also there's many different systems of astrology and interpreting astrology. There is the quote unquote Western way. There is like Eastern astrology, Chinese astrology, Vedic astrology. There's so many different options. And when you're talking about, oh, if this person isn't able to really pursue their north node, I don't necessarily think that that's going to be happening really anymore, because we're in such an accelerated personal growth stage that everyone is seeking purpose and why. We're starting like new 20-year cycles with like Pluto and Aquarius, like period 9, which is all about change, transformation, about purposeful living and having our values being present in the things that we buy, the people that we connect with, the jobs that we have, the collaborations we have. Is much more alignment happening. So I would say it's more of a subtle of like, maybe like your north node has, let's say, in things that you have to learn, it might be 20% if someone doesn't relate to it as much. And maybe their Chiron fits like 50% and their moon is like 30%, you know?
Yeah, that totally makes sense, because not every sign resonates completely. And also, everybody, even though there are certain descriptions that are said to be this or that, I think it's also your own interpretation of how you feel that sign fits. So, for example, when you were talking about South Node in Leo, I do resonate with being an artist. And I always knew from a young age that I would be doing art in some capacity. I just knew. I didn't know how or why or how it would manifest. And I also never thought I'd be doing tarot cards or I'd be making tarot cards. So I feel like the gifts that you have from a young age, it does help prepare you for whatever is next. You might not know what is coming next, but I do believe that every life experience that you take, whether it's easy or challenging, does prepare you for the next moment. And I think that, I don't necessarily feel like the space of tarot and divination and astrology are best used for predictive purposes, although I know that people do that. And I kind of see this world more so about self-awareness and how to cultivate that inner relationship with oneself. And so a lot of it also is just about being in the present moment, because if you're not paying attention to how you're feeling in the moment, you can't take direct action to then create that shift, change your mindset, be able to go after your dream career. And there could be people around you that are not chasing their dream career. And that's also okay because maybe that's their path and their karma and their situation to deal with. But I suppose this is more so about the collective trend. We are seeing more people step into their purpose of whether it's like starting a business or being the first in their family to do a certain something or achieve a certain goal. And I think that's very inspiring, to give people that chance to fully pursue their authentic selves while staying in alignment and integrity with your values. So you mentioned your values earlier in the interview, and I was wondering how your values changed or shifted from when you were creating Woo Woo Company. What are your values now versus before Woo Woo Company?
I think that your values will shift constantly because you are shifting. I think that in my 20s, I was really focused on external validation, which is why I had shared kind of like the example of Capricorn and its very traditional notions of success, but that are shifting because we as a society are shifting as well. And so I was like, okay, well, I should be on this list, or by this age, I should really have this type of title. And one of the biggest changes I've experienced is, yeah, like just letting go of those external things that kind of really quote unquote determine who you are and your reality and your identity, and just being more okay with yourself, caring less about what people think, and yeah, just valuing authenticity, valuing connection. And my biggest value shift is just like, does it feel right for me? Instead of it being like, oh, does this look right? Is this what I should be doing?
Yeah. So did you feel like there was any resistance from people that have known you growing up or anything like that when you shifted more into a more spiritual type of business? Or how would you describe that? Because it does sound very practical the way that you present it to corporations, because I know you do corporate events and you're also presenting it in a way where I feel like it is very pragmatic, like it'll help you in your life in some matter. How do you find the tangibility of combining the spiritual and the practical and wrapping it in a package for people?
This is something that a lot of people are exploring and asking me about as well, because I'm meeting so many more people that want to bring spirituality into corporate. And I think it's very nuanced. And one of the most important things I realized in these last few years was like, you can't really hide who you are. Like, I'm never going to do a corporate workshop and not say that I'm an astrologer. Like, I will share more about like my background of like, oh, I was in consumer marketing, I work with these types of brands. And I think it's really up to everyone's own comfort level, because I have seen, like, let's say a company Google that goes really all the way out there, hiring one of my friends that it's like very, very spiritual, but it depends on the team, right? It depends on like who's going to be attending this workshop versus, let's say, another business unit that wants something that is like more relaxing and just wants like a sound bath, but they don't really want like a breathwork component, or they don't want anything other than, oh, I just want this to be something like relaxing. I think that it really just hinges upon that individual person and what they want to share and how they want to share it. But the most important part is just like, does it feel right for you? And from my perspective, I have always just had a strong interest in career, as well as just like having that Capricorn stellium as well. Just like it's the sign of career. And that's what felt right for me, to share astrology in a way that helps people understand like leadership styles or communication style, at least from like a corporate standpoint.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the collective. What's going on right now in astrology?
So we've just finished eclipse season, which is March and April, and we're actually wrapping up some pretty big lessons around identity, boundaries, relationships, how we can be healthier in our relationship dynamics, and what kind of toxic habits and dynamics we are facilitating or supporting and we don't even realize. And so this cycle started officially last July, but I really felt that beginning stages were in March. And so anybody with Aries placements, Libra placements, planets in the first house, in the seventh house were really, really affected this past year, and specifically affected in the month of April, which I would like to say is one of the most challenging months of this year, purely because we are moving into a more transitionary eclipse season in the fall. So this past March and April and last like October, November, those are when the lessons really, really hit around who am I as a person? What do I stand for? How do I stand up for myself? How do I feel more confident? And how does this new version of myself get reflected in relationships? So during this time, there was a lot of breakups romantically, friendship wise, work wise, shifting in family dynamics as well. And this new season that we're entering is about integrating all of these lessons and finding new community and new groups that really represent who we are becoming and who we actually are. And so from the end of May until the rest of this year, it's going to be like a very busy time in community building, in communication, in speaking your truth, and really activating your voice.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful. I definitely felt that as a Aries sun. All right. We're going to move into our fast five questions. What is your sun, moon, and rising?
Leo, Capricorn, and Capricorn.
And how does that resonate with you?
Accurate.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Don't take things so seriously.
How would you define everyday magic?
Intuitive living.
What are your favorite rituals?
Morning rituals are my favorite. So meditating, breath work, taking a walk outside, and doing some stretching, some yoga.
What are you looking forward to in the near future?
I'm looking forward to clarity. There's a couple different things that are shifting and changing. And I think in these next few weeks, I will receive a lot more clarity for next steps in my own business and career.
Yeah, and for anyone that doesn't know, Alice does have free reports on her website. Alice, would you like to tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the website is yoursaturn.com. I created this website to share astrology in a practical way. So it's a couple paragraphs about yourself and who you are, what lights you up, what gifts you have, as well as some ideas about potential jobs and industries to get into. So you don't need to know anything about astrology. You can just read those couple of paragraphs and kind of just gain a deeper understanding of self and really acceptance of self. Those are really my intentions when creating this product.
Yeah, so for anyone curious to learn more about career astrology, definitely check out Alice's report on her website. Even if you're in your Saturn return or out of your Saturn return, or just purely wondering what to focus on in your career, what is your path? I think that is a great resource to have. So, Alice, we usually end our episodes with a collective reading. Alice is going to use a deck that she used this morning. By who is it by and what is the deck?
So it's the Healing Mantra deck and it's by Matt Hahn. It's from Hay House. It's a Hay House deck.
Great, great, great.
I really like using this one during sound baths, workshops that I host, because sometimes people just need to know, like, okay, like, what do I need to focus on so I can feel better? And I feel like these cards give powerful but succinct insights and information.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what comes out.
So, I've actually never drawn this card before. It's called Creating Cooperation. More gets accomplished when everyone has a role to play.
Wow. I feel like that ties into a lot of what you were talking about with the collective, about finding our tribe, building communities, finding connections. So I think part of that too is recognizing that we all play a part in how we resonate, relate to each other, but also how we contribute. And I think that is part of our purpose in some ways, not just like what we're able to create maybe like a product or tangibly, but also like how can you cultivate and create connection? How do you relate to your neighbor as an example, or the person you run into at the grocery store? Like how are you cultivating these connections that may seem insignificant but actually could change someone's day? It kind of reminds me of this moment when I was younger, when I was in high school and I was like walking across the street to soccer practice, and this guy was looking really angry in his car, and I just cracked a smile at him and he just broke out into this big smile. And I was actually shocked because he looked like a very angry type of person, but you never know whose life you can impact. And I think that's what that card reminds me of.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful interpretation.
Yeah. All right, Alice, thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom today on Saturn, the career astrology, understanding ourselves more, and cultivating ourselves through our career. This was awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode with Alice Hu. Learning more about career astrology, building the foundation for our success based on our strengths is super helpful, especially since we spend so much time, energy, and effort, not to mention years, building our careers. And nowadays, it's not just about making money. It's also about building a career that expresses your purpose, as Alice and I talked about with this collective trend. I'm curious, after listening to this conversation, what are some of your key career placements? How is that helping you navigate your career forward? And how do you see that playing out in your own life? And as a reminder, we are doing a giveaway of Alice's expanded career report over on YouTube and Instagram. Until next time, Mystics, this year is a doozy. So if you're having trouble navigating the cosmos, you're not alone. Cultivate connection and reach out for support if you need to. Sending you grace today and every day. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. Remember to subscribe and check out more Grace podcast episodes for how to apply everyday magic to your everyday life. See you next time.